up with a death scene that leaves everybody gratified is perhaps harder than it seems. I'm Ewan, this is War Culture, and here are 10 movie villains who got disappointingly lame deaths. Number 10. William Stranix. Under Siege. 1992's Under Siege represents the high point of Steven Seagal's popularity. It's not his best film, gotta hand that one to Mark for Death, but Casey Ryback is probably his most iconic role, with the fugitive director Andrew Davis creating a functional, albeit slightly chaotic die-hard pastiche, rounded out by Gary Busey and Tommy Lee Jones as the two chief antagonists. Jones's William Stranix is by far the highlight of the film, a wild, clearly a bit loopy former CIA officer dressed in some impeccable hippie rocker clothing, seriously one of the best villain fits ever. Stranix and Seagal's Ryback come to blows in the final act. However, anyone who has seen a Seagal movie will know how this goes down. Every film he's in is a monument to his own insecurities, so much so that he barely gets hurt on screen. The final fight in Under Siege is basically just him kicking Stranix's ass. He gets a nick on the eyebrow, that's it, and then he just thumb pokes him in the eye after taking Stranix's knife in between his teeth and then stabs him in the noggin, throwing him into a screen. It's a cool effect, and I know it's part of Seagal's endearingly pathetic charm, but if he was willing to sell TLJ just a little bit more, Under Siege would have ended way stronger. Number 9. Ernst Stavro Blofeld. For Your Eyes Only. There have been many lame Bond villain deaths over the years, yet none quite as embarrassingly ill-conceived as the demise of Blofeld in For Your Eyes Only. The iconic antagonist is killed off in the film's opening sequence, and while that might sound like a bold move on paper, it was ultimately due to a legal dispute between screenwriter Kevin McClory and Eon Productions over the copyright to Thunderball and, in turn, Blofeld. As a result, Blofeld couldn't be formally identified on screen, with a character bearing an uncanny resemblance to him whose face is never shown, played by John Hollis and credited as, quote, bald-headed man with white cat, instead battling 007 in the pre-title sequence. It's not so much the writing around Blofeld that stings, but rather the toe-curlingly goofy manner of his death, where Bond scoops up his wheelchair with a helicopter and promptly dumps him down a giant chimney. A villain as iconic as Blofeld deserved a much better end than this, and given that the character didn't get another appearance in a Bond film until Spectre over 30 years later, it left an especially sour taste. Number 8. Bane and Talia al Ghul. The Dark Knight Rises. Here's a twofer in Christopher Nolan's otherwise pretty good The Dark Knight Rises. The primary villain for most of this superhero epic is of course Bane, played by Tom Hardy, who rather than receive a fittingly bombastic death for his misdeeds, is unceremoniously offed when Selena Kyle shows up out of nowhere and blasts him with the Batpod's cannons. While it is a convenient way to kill Bane without having Batman break his no-kill policy yet again, the abrupt nature of the death, the unfussed manner in which Nolan shoots it, and the fact he's instantly forgotten about thereafter all made it a bit of a huge letdown. And not content to disappoint us just once, Nolan goes one further and serves up an unintentionally hilarious and cringe-worthy end for the puppet master villain, Talia al Ghul, played by Marion Cotillard. Talia is mortally wounded in a truck crash in the film's climax, and after letting out one final villainous monologue, suddenly expires by closing her eyes and shaking her head with all the conviction of a child acting in the school's pantomime. Number 7. George Harvey, The Lovely Bone. It rendered it comical. Number 6. Super Shredder. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. Things were decidedly not go ninja, go for Shredder in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. The film climaxes with the Turtles taking on the Super Shredder, an ooze-enhanced version of their arch-nemesis from the original movie. Now, kids everywhere were fist-pumping when this hulking, brutish, new version of the Shredder showed up to do battle, only to wonder what the hell was going on when he basically died by being crushed by himself. It's not a great scene. Super Shredder, essentially a rage-filled version of the original Oroku Saki, promptly tees up his own demise by angrily tearing apart the foundations of the dock on which he's standing, causing it to collapse on him, all the while the turtles barely make their escape. It amounts to about 10 seconds of a guy punching wooden beams and getting himself killed. Nowhere near as dramatic or as cool as the previous film's ending. Number 5. Kurt Hendricks, Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol. It's It's not unfair to say that Kurt Hendricks is probably the most forgettable villain in the Mission Impossible franchise, and the part was an abject waste of the late great Michael Nyqvist. However, nothing stung more than the character getting such a head-scratcher of a death. During his final clash with Ethan Hunt, Hendricks uses a briefcase device to trigger a Russian submarine to fire a nuclear missile at San Francisco, and to prevent Hunt from getting hold of the briefcase to stop it, he makes the ultimate sacrifice, jumping to his death with the case in tow. While on one hand it demonstrates how brutally committed Hendricks is to his cause, it doesn't really hold up to much scrutiny. Namely, why the hell didn't he just throw the briefcase down to the floor and keep fighting Hunt? For all the trouble Hendricks had caused Hunt and his team throughout the film, it would have been nice to see him suffer a more satisfying death at Hunt's own hands. Number 4. Albert Wesker, Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. Love or hate the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movies, Albert Wesker is an iconic villain from the video games who absolutely deserved an insanely over-the-top death. And given the film series' penchant for wildly ridiculous video gamey action, that certainly seemed to be on the cards. But in Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, Wesker, played by Sean Roberts, received a weirdly ill-fitting death, having his arm crushed by a security door in the film's climax at the behest of Umbrella's mischievous AI, the Red Queen. Wesker is simply left to bleed out with his arm pulped beneath the giant door before Alice, Mia Jovovich, places a dead man's switch in his hands. Wesker drops the switch when he finally bleeds to death, triggering an explosion that obliterates his corpse and everyone left inside the Umbrella facility known as the Hive. But considering that Wesker was killed with 2 rockets inside an active volcano in the games, death by door can't help but seem totally unimaginative by comparison. Number 3. The Horde and Mr. Glass. Glass. Another 2 for now, with M. Night Shyamalan's disappointing conclusion to his Unbreakable trilogy, Glass. In fact, all 3 central characters end up dying bafflingly unsatisfying deaths, including its 2 superpowered villains, the Horde, James McAvoy, and Elijah Price, aka Mr. Glass, played by Samuel L. Jackson. First up, the Horde is suddenly shot by a SWAT sniper in the climax, after which he dies in the arms of Casey, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, while reverting back to his original personality, which is of course Kevin. And then there's Mr. Glass, who has his fragile bones crushed by the Horde and later expires from his injuries. Now, it's clear that Shyamalan wanted to deliver an expectation-defying superhero movie with Glass, but even if the 3 central characters all received unsatisfying deaths on purpose, it's still somewhat disappointing in practice. Number 2. Michael Myers, Halloween Ends. Green followed up his promising but at times frustratingly comedic 2018 offering with the divisive Halloween Kills, a movie I kind of personally love despite its warts, before capping it off with Halloween Ends. Rather than continue more the night Michael came back home though, Ends implemented a pandemic time jump, flashing forward 4 years after the events of the first 2 films to a happier version of Laurie who has learned to accept and live with her trauma. All this time, Michael has been living in the Haddonfield sewers, subsisting on a diet of rats and wet wipe fatbergs or something. That is, until he's awakened by Corey Cunningham, a troubled teen who eventually steals Michael's mask and becomes the new Shape. Ignoring the debate over Corey here, because that's really a whole other video thing, Michael returns to reclaim his mask from a now dead Corey for a final, nostalgia-baity showdown with Laurie, who is now eye-rollingly dressed up in her outfit from the 1978 original. Michael gets killed in the fight, succumbing to injuries he'd shrugged off quite easily before, and then Haddonfield has a procession for him before throwing him into a weird, massive industrial shredder thing. It's all just a bit childish, ending the series that seemed like it understood what made Michael so fascinating, but ultimately turned out to just demystify him further. And number 1, Jürgen Voller. Mads Mikkelsen was nothing if not perfectly cast as the final Indiana Jones movie's primary antagonist, Nazi Jürgen Voller. And given the series' storied history of dealing gnarly, unforgettable deaths to its villains, it was reasonable to expect the same for Voller. But Voller goes out in Dial of Destiny in strangely lackluster fashion in the film's time-traveling climax, where Voller's plane is shot down by soldiers believing it to be a dragon. Moments later, we catch a glimpse of Voller's burned corpse, which, while mildly gross for a PG-13 movie in 2023, can't hold a candle to the face-melting antics of Raiders or any of the other indie movies. It was a weirdly uneventful, even ordinary death for the movie's towering antagonist, and like the film as a whole, just not quite good enough to be truly memorable. And those were 10 movie villains who got disappointingly lame deaths. Which of the villain deaths left you feeling cold? Sound off in the comments down below, and while you're down there, it would be properly lovely if you drop the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss another upload going forward. Either way, thank you all for watching. I've been Ewan, this has been War Culture, and I'll hopefully catch you next time. Bye!